And also we're partnering with the County of Sacramento, we received a grant to launch a capacity building program starting in January. And, it's really exciting to see some of these partnerships form through either people are paying attention to crises, right? They pay attention when there's, emergent issues. And so it's been actually a silver lining to some of the issues, I think, where government, at least locally, and business are coming together to support the nonprofit sector.
Hi, I'm Jeff Holden. Welcome to the Nonprofit Podcast Network. Our purpose and passion is to highlight a nonprofit organization in each weekly episode, giving that organization an opportunity to tell their story in their words to better inform and educate the respective communities they serve, as well as provide one more tool for them to share their message to constituents and donors. Our goal is to help build stronger communities through shared voices and to both encourage and support the growth of local nonprofit organizations through podcasting. Thanks to our partners for their support in getting these stories told. CapTrust, fiduciary advice for endowments and foundations, and Western Health Advantage, a full-service healthcare plan for individuals, employer groups, and families. I'm proud to welcome our newest partner to the program, CORE, Interim and Fractional Executive Leadership, Comprehensive Back Office Support Services. We work in it so you can work on it. Visit cxore.com. When basic needs get squeezed, when uncertainty rises, and when the demand for help keeps climbing, the people on the front lines feel it first. Families, seniors, working households, and the nonprofits trying to keep up. This is a premium content episode. I've brought together 4 community foundation leaders representing 4 counties for one shared conversation about what they're seeing on the ground, what they're hearing from nonprofits and donors, and how philanthropy is adapting in real time. I'll be speaking with Kerry Wood, CEO of the Sacramento Region Community Foundation, Jessica Hubbard, Executive Director of the Yolo Community Foundation, Veronica Blake, CEO of the Placer Community Foundation, and Amy Pooley, Executive Director of the ElDorado Community Foundation. This is one of those conversations where you realize quickly community foundations aren't just writing checks. They're building bridges between donors and needs, between nonprofits and each other, and between today's crisis response and tomorrow's long-term solutions. Because across our region, the pressure is real. Needs are rising, resources are tighter, and the questions nonprofit leaders are asking about sustainability, collaboration, and what's coming next are getting more urgent by the month. We talk about the issues showing up everywhere, the ripple effects you may not be hearing about yet, and the strategies that could genuinely change how nonprofits survive and serve heading into 2026. Kerry Wood, Veronica Blake, Amy Pooley, and Jessica Hubbard, welcome to the Nonprofit Podcast Network.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
To say this has been quite a year for our nonprofits would really be an understatement. I'd like to get your feedback on what the most pressing challenges you're experiencing in your respective communities. Jessica, let's start with you in Yolo County.
Absolutely. I think that food insecurity has been a challenge in Yolo County for a long time, which can be ironic given the fact that it's a food producing region. And so the impact of first the federal cuts to food distribution nonprofits earlier this year, followed by the snap impacts of the shutdown, have been pretty devastating for the local community and therefore for local nonprofits.
Kerry, how about Sacramento? What do you see here?
I echo what Jessica said, around food. We have a lot of housing issues here in Sacramento. The cost of living just continues to increase and increase. The demand for nonprofit services increases while there are limited resources, of course, for nonprofits, especially in light of the funding cuts that many nonprofits have experienced. And we have so many wonderful nonprofits in town, but limited resources to really meet all of their needs. So I think in a nutshell, it is, there are multiple issues going on for our residents, with limited resources to provide that support that they need.
Veronica, how about Placer County?
Yeah, we're seeing the same as my colleagues. Certainly, the demand for affordable housing has been in place in our community for about 30 years, and that's been sort of a signature line of work that the Community Foundation's been working on. But also in food insecurity, our food banks and pantries are seeing a 40% increase in demand, and that was before the federal shutdown. We have about 80,000 families, or 19% of our population, is on Medicaid. And that means these families are making less than $2,000 a month. I'd also add that we have an aging population in Placer, many of which our seniors are living in isolation, and they themselves are really vulnerable to becoming unhoused.
Yeah.
And Amy, that leaves ElDorado County. What's happening there?
Yeah, so same, echoing a lot of sentiments of my colleagues here. A lot of similar statewide concerns. I think that all of us can convene around and understand that we're all feeling a lot of the same stressors in our communities. Housing certainly at the forefront of ElDorado County needs. Transportation in our rural community here for some of our more outlying areas in South County and the Divide up and into the basin a little bit is continuing an issue. How are our families getting and accessing services? Food insecurity is on the top of all of our minds, considering especially these last few weeks. We, similarly to some of our peers here, have about 1 in 5 in ElDorado County that recognized as food insecure. So that is concerning to us as well. And then overall, the continued mental health taxation on all of these rising economic stressors, right? So we know when the economy gets stressful, when there's lack of housing, lack of taxes, food insecurity, that is taxing on our mental health, that is taxing on our families. So we are very keenly watching all of our agencies, our youth service agencies, our family agencies, and how they're responding. I think what Kerry said about the increase in demand on our nonprofits is significantly greater, while resources are continuing to be a little bit limited. So it is really been a year.
Yeah, just an understatement. As I mentioned in the beginning, we hear it from so many different spaces. With the food insecurity, are you seeing any particular demography more prevalent than another?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that in ElDorado County. For some of our Spanish-speaking families, I think getting an access to services and food is a little bit overwhelming. It's very concerning sometimes to go and get resources from some of our agencies that have relationships and funding from larger government entities, right? So our Spanish-speaking population certainly feeling a little ostracized there perhaps, but we do actually have a nonprofit that has come forward in the last 2 years to move into that space and is doing fantastic work with the limited resources that they do have at an offsite row food distribution specifically for our farm workers, our Spanish-speaking families, that is not publicly disclosed intentionally.
Here
Anybody
in
else?
Yolo County, the Yolo Food Bank released a food access survey report last year. It was really, full of information. But one of the most striking findings of their research was that food insecurity among farm workers is very, very high. One of the most highest need groups within Yolo County. Obviously, it's tragic to think of farm workers spending their days, their weeks, their lives creating food for the rest of us and then not having access to that food themselves. So I know the Yellow Food Bank and a lot of our local organizations have been really focused on that, but it remains an ongoing need.
And we've been really proud at the Sacramento Region Community Foundation to partner with Jessica and her team at Yolo Community Foundation on seeing what we can do to address some of the issues around food insecurity in Yolo County, especially. With Yolo County being obviously one of the highest counties in terms of poverty level. It's incredible to think right in our backyard, right? And Jessica, where you live and work, that kind of challenge exists. One thing I'll add is that I'm hearing a lot about senior citizens and our elderly population are really having some struggles too. So working families, the list goes on. And I think it's not a one size fits all kind of answer.
Veronica?
Yeah, 29,000 people are on SNAP in Placer, and 7,000 of which are going to get kicked off in January. So we're working with our local partners in collaboration to try to figure out how are we going to help those 7,000 people that are completely kicked off food assistance. You have to remember that now with rents being as high as they are, a renter in Placer needs to make $39 an hour in order to afford the basic rent here. And so while some families weren't traditionally relying on the food bank, they have to now because their money needs to go to rent, it needs to go to their car payment, it needs to go to providing their children with clothing so they can go to school. So we're seeing a real shift and a real reliance on the food safety net that we haven't seen before.
I think that will also grow in January if anticipated changes to health insurance coverage
Mhm.
happen. If people are paying drastically more for health insurance, that leaves even less for rent and for food.
Mhm.
And that's going to parlay nicely into the next question. With shifting donor priorities, what are you seeing with regard to the near-term distribution of funds? And secondly, how has your grant making or funding strategy changed over the last year as we're anticipating 26?
I know we activated, emergency fund that we have here at the foundation for addressing the issues that we all know very well around the SNAP benefits and the funding cuts and the impact there. But one of the things that's been shifting at our foundation has been, yes, we want to deploy funds for immediate needs, but also long-term needs. What are ways, and maybe even preventative in some way? How are we maybe helping to be part of a solution to improve systems and work together with partners to see how we can strengthen some of the work, both elevating philanthropy for those immediate needs, but also thinking about how we can look. We call it upstream, and create some investments that might be able to help with the prevention of poverty and food insecurity that results.
Great.
Anybody else on that one?
I took a look at our most recent distributions, the grants coming out of our donor advised funds and other funds just before this call. And I did see a significant focus on food insecurity organizations, but also I was pretty pleasantly surprised to see the amount of resources going to year-end appeal type granting to sort of pillar of the community type organizations. I am concerned, like on the one hand, it's so critical that we all provide organizations that do poverty alleviation, address basic needs with the resources that they need to meet, to support people in tremendous need right now. On the other hand, this isn't a short-term problem. And so I'm concerned about like the sustainability and the viability of the rest of our nonprofit sector. And so I was pleased to see that the first few grants going out around year-end appeal do seem to be heavily focused on food and basic needs, but also addressing other important local organizations.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would just add to that that we're starting to work with a lot of faith-based partners, and we're seeing more churches stepping up and being involved in providing some of that social fabric and the services to people. It's been delightful to see the mission alignment there. And I actually heard from a donor last week who said, Veronica, as much as I love supporting the work through nonprofits, I also want to see working with churches because they're in the neighborhoods and they can provide additional assistance in those neighborhoods in a way that's very unique to our communities and very unique to their neighborhoods.
I also like that because churches represent, religious organizations represent a wider range of demographic groups. And so often sort of traditional philanthropists are not heavily diverse. And so working with churches allows you to reach a much wider range of volunteers and donors.
Mhm. For ElDorado County, I just wanted to note that for our community, we have a really rich history of taking care of one another because we're a small community, we're rural, right? And I think what I'd love to see over this past year, the Community Foundation holds two crisis funds that support basic human needs in times of an individual crisis. We work with our nonprofit partners to sponsor those requests. And we had a donor come forward in the last year and open a third fund that has offered substantial assistance for these basic human needs, filling those gaps, making sure that we are continuing to honor the traditions of taking care of one another, right? So we added that third fund. And then I think for all of us as community foundations, everything education is everything. I think we all can agree with that as partners and peers, that educating our donors on the needs, educating on ways to help is certainly our role in what our ElDorado Community Foundation has taken on, and allowing our donors to engage and give more directly based upon that education of needs, right? So, and I know I've seen Placer, I've seen Sac Regional do the same. So really commending our community foundations from that education piece for our donors.
I'll just piggyback on what Amy just said. What's interesting is we did a social media post on food security recently where we featured 4 of our strongest partners throughout the county to give directly to those organizations, or alternatively to give to the community foundation's community needs fund, and then we would direct the money. And we put that post up. It had 200 shares.
Yeah.
So, from my perspective, the donors are just as hungry, if you will, to be supportive and to be engaged and to have a pathway to give as much as the people who are needing the assistance. And so it's sort of a really unique opportunity for community foundations to be a bridge between the donors and those communities.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and certainly basic needs are the highest priority because that's food and housing. With money redirected or directed towards them, it may siphon off a little bit from some of the other requirements for other organizations. And a lot of our nonprofits are under a lot of pressure right now as they look at what's happening with funding and looking into 2026. What stories might you be hearing with regard to innovative or collaborative approaches emerging that we might have never even been thinking about a year ago?
One of the things I'll just kick this off is shared services. We're seeing a lot of at least discussions, and I have not worked with these collaboratives directly, but um, nonprofits are looking for ways to be more efficient, whether they're merging together, collaborating more, but sharing services that normally are very costly, like legal guidance, HR, right, financial, whether it's from bookkeeping all the way to CFO kinds of levels of work that some of them can't afford to handle on their own. So they're coming together, collaborating, and sharing services. So that's been an interesting thing I've noted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Similar to what Veronica talked about with Placer, we've recently, just last week, had one of our partners, Bridging Divides, come together with our interfaith community. So our faith community coming together, very similar to Placer, saying, how can we help? We have different diversity in clientele, we have different diversity in views, but we all recognize the need to do something. And then I think additionally, our strategic plan and our board are really pushing on how can the foundation potentially lead on those back of the house services, HR, legal, accounting services to support our nonprofits potentially in the future, as well as their funding resources are limited and the demand increases. So yeah, very similar to some of our partners as well on that.
We launched a program this year called Yolo Neon. It's nonprofit excellence and operations navigator that is around helping nonprofits build out policies and procedures around back office services. So accounting and finance, HR, IT, and legal. Which is essentially like a supported DIY program. But what we are learning from that program is that there's a tremendous need for non-DIY services in those areas. And I think part of we've seen a real appetite for shared services and collaboration, but I think a real challenge is that collaboration takes time, and in the nonprofit sector and anywhere, time takes money. And so this is work that still has to be funded, even though it will save money and resources in the long term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with everything my colleagues are saying. I'll just say that at Placer, we've been doing capacity building in some way, shape, or form for the past 20 years. And to that extent, it still does have a lot of opportunities for improvement. We see a number of organizations that are smaller in our community now that have the ability to bill like Medi-Cal for services, and our Placer Collaborative Network, which is a network of health and human service agencies that includes local government, have been working for the past several years on trying to get more people in, more organizations into the ability to be able to bill for their work so that they can be more sustainable. And I think there'll probably be some more opportunities in that space that will come together for collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
That's
And
amazing. I'd love to learn more about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. And you sparked something when with what you said, Veronica. Collaboration's been interesting to see how many corporate funders. In fact, we've got several corporate funders that are providing support for capacity building specific work at community foundations, at ours and others from what I've heard. And also we're partnering with the County of Sacramento, launching, we received a grant to launch a capacity building program starting in January. And, it's really exciting to see some of these partnerships form, through either people are paying attention to crises, right? They pay attention when there's, emergent issues. And so it's been actually, a silver lining to some of the issues, I think, where government, at least locally, and, business are coming together to support the nonprofit sector.
And I'm pleased to hear that because each one of you had something respective to your individual counties. For those who are listening who may not have known or weren't aware, they now know there are opportunities and places to go if they hadn't already been going down that path. That may, in some cases, even save an organization because they don't have the ability to fund some of those back end services, whatever they may be.
Yeah. Can I just add one other point before we move on? And I think even just all of us being together on this podcast to hear and take the time out of our daily schedules, right, that we're so busy with, to hear what our peers are doing. And our League of California Community Foundations is great about doing this as well. But as community foundations, also being leaders in space for our local nonprofits to come together to create space to exhale a little bit, to find the strength and candor of coming together, whether it's around capacity building or whether it's just sitting in the same room, and really continuing to allow them to vent in a really unsecure space right now, as well as find strength in one another and have kind of a purposeful renewal around I'm not the only one feeling this way. It's a natural collaboration that we are seeing in ElDorado County and that we're really encouraging because, it does take time. But I think that as community foundations, the more we can create space for our nonprofits to exhale and be safe and know that they're all in it together, the better as well, too.
I really agree with that. I find I like to think that our trainings are wonderful, but it's really clear that no matter how good the training is, no matter what an expert the trainer is, the number one value of nearly every training we offer is that the nonprofits connect with each other. They learn they're not alone. They release the shame of feeling like they're uniquely screwing this up,
Mhm.
and they, connect and support one another. So
Yeah.
absolutely the learning matters, but the connection matters as well. So
Yeah.
much.
Mhm.
I agree with everything my colleagues are saying. I would just also add to that I think donors' expectations are that we work together. And so I think that when to the extent that we come together, we can create this space, we can figure out better strategies to serve our friends and neighbors, the more delight we will get from our donors and the larger the investment we will get from them.
Mhm.
We'll be back with more of this wonderful conversation from our Community Foundation leaders right after we hear from those making this program possible.
We are really excited to be part of the family and contribute to the work that you all are doing. CORE provides fractional and interim executive services along with comprehensive back office solutions that go into our client sites and do the work to give them the capacity they need in order to move through transitions, whether that's planned or unplanned. Or companies also work with our accounting and finance, back office solutions, human resources, technology, and administration. The reason why our back office solutions add value is because we save them time and money, anywhere from 20 to 30% of what they would spend on that back office solution. We work in it so they can actually work on it. CXORE.com and contact me directly at DTEAT@CXORE.com.
If you're interested in learning more about how CORE may help your organization, visit CXORE.com.
Hello, this is Scott Thomas with Cap Trust in our Sacramento office. I specialize in working with local nonprofits and associations. Annually, we survey private and public nonprofit organizations across the country to better understand challenges they see in today's environment. In our more recent survey, we heard concerns about proper board governance, mission-aligned investment, and how to implement alternative investments. If you would like a copy of the survey or to discuss your organization, look me up, Scott Thomas at captrust.com.
I'm thrilled to have Western Health Advantage partnering with us as they do so much to support so many nonprofit agencies in our community. As a truly local health plan, you'll find individual and family options, employer options, plans for CalPERS and Medicare Advantage. From medical services to pharmacy, health and wellness support, as well as behavioral health care, Western Health Advantage has a plan that fits what you need. As an employer, for profit or nonprofit business, individual or family, you can find more at westernhealth.com. Wonderfully said. And I think just the conversation, just the statement of people seeing this conversation together with everybody.
Yeah.
One of the things that we see as people come through for the Nonprofit Podcast program itself, the nonprofits that we speak with, the majority are familiar that you exist in their respective counties. Not everybody takes advantage of the services, and some feel that, well, I'm too small, or I just don't think there's something there for me.
Well,
How do your individual foundations ensure that nonprofits of all sizes and service continue to have a voice and funding opportunities?
I know we have several programs, the Big Day of Giving, which I know everybody's familiar with, but we accept just about every size of nonprofit. There are trainings involved, support for nonprofits of every size. And so we really work hard to, be as inclusive as possible, so that the smaller organizations don't feel dwarfed by, some of the larger nonprofits. And then we have a program called Cultivate. And Cultivate it was inspired by Big Day of Giving, when we noticed that smaller nonprofits, especially those led by people of color, were disproportionately um, represented when it came to the dollars raised and the attention, frankly, they were getting from donors in the community. So um, I could go on, but I'll stop there just and conclude and say that we definitely have seen that to be an issue for the smaller organizations, and we're working to make sure that they really feel a part of and getting support in a number of ways.
I love what you just said, Carrie. And I'll just add to that recently in Placer, we've been doing some of the same work in the sense that we've been introducing our donor pipeline to our smaller nonprofits so that they can get to know each other. And recently that amounted to a $100,000 unrestricted grant to one of our community-based organizations. And so I think that the community foundations do play a significant role in helping others understand how to cultivate those donor relationships. Another thing we do at Placer is we take donors out on site visits and we accompany them with our program officers so that we can help explain and create bridging language between what the organization is doing and what the donors' interests are. And we find that those site visits always amount in greater philanthropy to those organizations.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. It really is. I think for ElDorado Community Foundation, and I think any community foundation, right? When you said, Jeff, that you talk to a lot of your nonprofits and they're aware of community foundations, there's sometimes a very unwarranted level of intimidation. Like, well, I don't want to talk to the community foundation, or maybe I'm not big enough. So I think it's important we create a lot of space around just come and talk to us, right? Our doors are always open, making sure we're very accessible. I think we do a survey to our nonprofits also every year at the beginning of the year to say, how can we better serve you? How are we doing in granting, in our programs, in our capacity building training? And what do you need? Because I think historically our foundation was just kind of telling the other nonprofits, here's what we think you need. So we've changed that in the last 2 years to really say, what do you need and how could we help? And then we do a lot of fiscal sponsorship. We do micro grants. We do grants that are targeted to acorn individuals or nonprofits, maybe that never have received a grant from our foundation or one of our competitive grant cycles before. Just really intentionally trying to make room for those smaller nonprofits that are doing very, very valuable work, because it is boots on the ground and it matters.
We
Well
do
said.
a state of the Yolo nonprofit sector report that's based on a survey and interviews. We get about a third of local nonprofits participating in that survey. The purpose is primarily to educate donors and decision makers in the community about the needs of nonprofits and how to help them be more effective, but we absolutely rely on that for our own programming as well. The other thing we do specifically for competitive grants is we always hold info session and open office hour sessions so that people can learn about grants. This came out of very early in my tenure at YCF. We had an open grant. Someone I knew outside of work called my cell phone, asked me questions, and I was like, other people who don't have my cell phone don't have that opportunity. This isn't rocket science, but it takes that sort of intentional, open effort and then we record it, we post it, we try to make that information broadly available. And then finally, we also try to identify sort of a diverse group of community leaders that can help us find all corners of the community. So we know that our network is not going to reach everyone, but if we can reach through our network, that we can blanket the county.
I love the
It's-
answers. I'm sorry.
Sorry, Jeff. And specifically, I just say donor advisement grants. We are really we code all of our grants, so we're really proud to say that 45% of all of our donor advised fund grants were led by community foundation staff to that donor. So these are ideas that we brought to the donor to say, hey, these are the things that you have signaled an interest in, and here's a way to invest. And I think that helps us build trust in the nonprofit community because we're bringing them money that in a donor advisement grant, they don't even have to apply for. And so it makes it really easy for them to access. And then once you build that trust, it gets easier to call the office and say what your needs are. And nonprofits in our community, I think, are pretty well trained to call us and tell us what's on their mind because we are able to help connect the dots for them.
Sure, that was the shortest question we've had, but it gave us the most robust answers, and I think they were wonderful for exposing the opportunities that exist at the community foundations, respectively, each of you, for anybody in those counties and collectively. There's so much opportunity for a nonprofit to take advantage of just by reaching out. Looking ahead, this may be the most difficult question given the uncertainty as we do look into the future. But it'd be impossible to have this conversation without addressing 2026. What trends or emerging issues are you preparing for that nonprofit leaders should really be paying attention to in your respective communities?
There's so many things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We could spend
Uh,
a whole hour just on that.
I know. I think, well, I'll start with one that's probably an obvious, but AI, right? We know that AI is changing so much, and if we aren't at least doing our best to try and use that tool to the best of our ability as a community foundation, but also working with our nonprofit sector as well, we're going to be missing out on some um, key opportunities. And I think AI is scary for a lot of people, just the term. But there are a lot of ways that, we're all seeing that we can use this tool both in engaging donors in a greater way than we could before. Research at our fingertips in a greater way than it ever was before. I will stop there, but just, I think that's one thing. And I've got 5, but I'll let others answer.
I would say, just on the AI point, I think one of the biggest risk factors to the nonprofit sector is sustainability and burnout. We have so many organizations trying to do so very much with such small staffs, and I mean, it's not appropriate. It's not respectful of our nonprofit workforce. It's also not sustainable, and so it's not strategic. And so, obviously there's lots to work out around AI, around ethical issues, effective use. There's lots to work out. But I really am hopeful that it can help address some of the sustainability and burnout issues in local nonprofits.
I would also add to this that there's a transfer of wealth that's occurring. And in that transfer of wealth, there's a lot of opportunity for larger size philanthropic gifts. So nonprofits should be partnering with their community foundations to bring those planned gifts in. We've been working on a plan giving strategy at Placer for the past 20 years, and it's starting to come to fruition. We're starting to see significant estate size gifts that are coming in. And these are kind of game changing gifts that can really have an impact in the different missions that our nonprofit organizations are carrying out. So I want to encourage any nonprofit that's out there thinking to also think ahead about plan giving, because the challenges we're facing today are going to be here tomorrow.
Mm. Mhm. And I think for the ElDorado Community Foundation, and again, I think for all of our community foundations as well, serving as a catalyst around major community issues, right? So for us moving into 2026, we've been doing some significant work around housing, listening sessions, having community led strategies with our county. Again, hearing what our community needs are and bringing those forward. We will all, I have no doubt, in 2026 continue to convene, to advocate, to fill gaps over major issues in each of our pressing or each of our respective communities. So I see that as a trend for our community as well. And I don't know that this is true for everyone, but we will continue to see a significant trend around fire hardening, wildfire resilience, and the rebuilding of our communities still post Caldor fire, right? We've still got a grisly plots, but a significant number of residents are still living in trailers there. So that will continue to trend into 2026 for us as well. I really liked what Jessica said about the nonprofit burnout and potentially utilizing AI there. What I think when our nonprofits are all vying for the same dollars, there's this genuine, again, like almost fear sometimes between agencies to collaborate. But what I do think for our nonprofits is we will be looking for collaboration. We will be looking for stronger long-term financial planning, and how our investments and grants will continue to foster longer-term success, like Kerry had said, back in one of the other questions. So that's kind of the trends that we're looking to on a go forward.
Also just add that bringing community voice to the table is pretty important. I mean, we have wonderful community leaders that we're working with in our nonprofit sector, but making sure we get down to the citizen level and the people that is our work and that our funding is actually impacting is going to be an important part of the equation. So nonprofits figuring out how to work with us to bring that voice forward is going to be really important.
Mhm.
Wonderful answers. I can see an episode on each one of the topics: AI, sustainability, mental health and physical wellness, burnout, transfer of wealth, community voices, listening sessions. Each one of those could be a wonderful episode in themselves for the benefit of our nonprofit constituents. We're just about out of time, so I thought we'd give each of you an opportunity to maybe highlight the three significant things you expect to be doing differently, just a high level into the new year. And it could be on the donor side, it could be funding for nonprofits, it could be something that we haven't addressed. And Veronica, you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. I don't know that anything is going to be all that different. To be honest, we've been in a culture of collaboration in Placer for, spanning 30 years of my nonprofit career and even longer. And I think we're going to double down in that. We're working with our Health and Human Services Agency to actually bring in a consultant that will work with our nonprofit sector and our governmental partners to find the different pathways that they want to work on. And again, to bring the community voice into. Same time, the Community Foundation uses these opportunities as a way to connect donors to the work and to fill in gaps where there isn't funding that's available, maybe from a governmental or a private foundation source. So just more of the same and more creative and really banking on the relationships that we've established over the last 20 years to lead us into a positive future for the residents of Placer County.
Amy?
Yeah. So I think for us, moving in baby steps, but more towards trust-based philanthropy with some of our grant systems. I think, being previously on the other side of applying for grants before I was here at the foundation, some of the grant questions I think that we all ask perhaps as community foundations can be a little redundant. And how are we really working towards a trust-based philanthropic effort so that we are supporting maybe some of those micro nonprofits and the bigger names too, right? Trust that they are doing their jobs without our constant oversight or 500 word essays on how they are truly impacting with these dollars, right? So moving into the trust-based philanthropy space for us, certainly engaging in the next generation of funders. That generational transfer of wealth, addressing that, having a plan for that. We've laid the strategies for a lot of that outreach, but I think it also with the next generation, we're looking at individuals who give differently than a generation previously. So how are we, working at all community foundation levels to recognize that philanthropy comes in all shapes and sizes and changing the face of philanthropy. So it's not just our traditional models, right? So moving into that space a little bit more aggressively, and then certainly, expanding some of our co-funding models in ElDorado County. We still have some substantial work to do about bringing those government dollars, the private dollars, and the philanthropic dollars together to make bigger impacts. But we are certainly ready to, continue to tackle that on.
Jessica?
Veronica referenced community voice earlier, and I think that's a good way to frame something that we're working on to really diversify our network as a foundation by cause, geography, demographics, industry, and so on, so that we really are hearing from and speaking with every corner of the county. A second piece, I think, is we've grown quite rapidly in the last 5 or 7 years, and so how do we thinking about organizational sustainability for the foundation itself? How do we continue to grow at the pace that the need requires, whilst in a way that is both financially responsible and sustainable for our team? Economic uncertainty, not necessarily economic challenges. There's lots of that, but there's also this overriding theme of uncertainty. And so the more we can grow our philanthropic funds and see dollars committed to philanthropy, the more we can insulate our community against ongoing uncertainty.
And Kerry?
I echo my colleagues in so many ways. Amy from Trust Based Philanthropy, we are also working on ways that we can simplify the grant process and make it easier for the partners that we trust, like you said, to do their work. So there's a lot of efforts in that direction. Collaborations and networking are, going to be continuing, and we want to grow. To bring nonprofits and donors together. We do a philanthropy summit now every fall, and that's an opportunity to open that dialogue up between funders, donors, and nonprofits. So we really want to step that up and see how many more people we can get there. Excited to see that growing, but also looking at ways that we can fill what I consider to be quite a gap here in the Sacramento area around support for nonprofits. And, how do we step into that even more deeply? And how do we get more funding for it? Because while we are a grant making organization, all community foundations need to raise funds too, to make some of these things happen. So we really see, stepping further into that work.
Boy, I could not be more encouraged by the positivity in each of your voices regarding the community and the community at large. And what you've all shared really reflects both the urgency and promise across the region. Your foundations aren't just responding, you're actually reimagining how philanthropy is working in this very challenging environment. So your collaboration reminds us that community foundations aren't just for the grant makers, they're really problem solvers, conveners, storytellers, and you're doing it for the people and nonprofits you serve. So my thanks to each of you, Veronica, Kerry, Amy, Jessica, for squeezing this conversation into an already jam-packed schedule. I know it's the end of the year and it couldn't be any more time demanding. Back to Jessica's comment on, mental health and well-being. But thank you so much. Your leadership is more critical than ever going forward. And I wish you the best of holidays ahead and here's to 2026.
Cheers to 2026.
Thank you.
Yeah. Happy holidays, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Nonprofit Podcast Network. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If what you heard moved you, please reach out to that organization and do what you can to help. If you like and appreciate what we're doing to support local nonprofits, please give us a positive review, subscribe, and share. If you're a nonprofit with an interest in participating in an episode, you can reach me at jeff@hearmenowstudio.com. Once again, we're grateful for the businesses who have made this program possible. CapTrust, fiduciary advice for endowments and foundations. You can find them in Sacramento, Roseville, and Folsom, captrust.com. And Western Health Advantage, a full-service healthcare plan for individuals, employer groups, and families. westernhealth.com.